Those viewers who've seen my couple of videos on my home electronics laboratory will have seen this really excellent oscilloscope made by Gold Star. I want to say I probably bought this a little bit more than 30 years ago, and it's been my primary scope for all this time. It's only a 20 megahertz model, but it is a dual trace. It has very good quality feeling knobs. It never felt cheap. It was very reliable. It stayed in calibration very well. And I always thought the layout was exceptionally simple and easy to understand. Everything was very intuitive. The switches all had an excellent feel to them. But as I've also mentioned, I think, in one of my earlier videos, it was getting to be unstable. And not unstable in terms of calibration, but in terms of drifty. It would just drift all over the place, and it never seemed to stabilize even after being on for hours. And it also had a problem with trace rotation, where just about every time I'd turn it on, the trace would require tweaking to get it so the scan would be nice and horizontal. And it's probably possible to fix this, but I was also running into some cases where the 20 megahertz wasn't quite fast enough. And as much as I love this scope, and by the way, Gold Star, you may say, what's Gold Star? But there is this company in Korea called Lucky Gold Star, and they use the Gold Star part of the name for test equipment. And then when they were going into more of a consumer oriented product line, selling to the States, for example, they took their name Lucky Gold Star and just abbreviated it to LG. So Gold Star is basically the company we now know as LG, which of course makes all sorts of high quality consumer and other electronics gear and home appliances and so on. So it's got a good pedigree. Anyway, I decided it was time to replace this. I'm not going to throw it away. I'm going to keep it for who knows what, but it still works well enough that I don't want to completely discard it, and I don't think I could sell it for enough to make it worth getting rid of. And it would just be frustrating if I peddled it off on some beginner who would find the driftiness annoying. So it's going to stay in storage with me for a while. And I also have this Siglent scope, which is a 200 megahertz scope, so 10 times the bandwidth of the LG or the Gold Star. But because of the fact that I have to be pushing buttons all the time just to get it to do what I want it to do, which is typical of these lower end, although high spec, but lower end prosumer scopes where they don't have enough buttons for everything, so you're constantly pushing buttons and cycling through menus just to get it to do things. I didn't find it suitable for day-to-day use, although I could, it'd just be more annoying. So I still wanted a good old analog scope, but something a little better, maybe a little newer. And what did I get, you may ask? This is what I got. A Tektronix 2235A 100 megahertz dual trace scope with some additional benefits. It's just the normal 2 channels, but it does have an A and a B time base, and I can select one or the other or alternate between them. And then there's also 2 time-based selectors, one for the primary and one for B, and B can be delayed, so it's a delayed sweep scope. And it has, of course, some additional selectors relating to that, beyond what a normal dual trace scope would have. And because it has the 2 sweep sections on it, It essentially acts like a scope that can have 4 traces, but it only has 2 inputs. But you can trigger the A and B channels separately, so it's got more controls for the triggering than a normal dual trace scope would have. Otherwise, it's pretty typical. It also has a double set of intensity controls with a concentric knob, so the A and the B traces can be given different intensities. And I'm going to fire this up here. I've got the inputs grounded now. So I just have my Siglent dual channel function generator generating some waveforms just right now for display purposes. And I'm not trying to make this into a 2235 demonstration video and just giving a quick overview. If I go over here into alt mode, all of a sudden there's these extra traces. That's the B channel or the B time base coming in. And I'm going to lower this down and lower this down. So I've got them all on there at once. And there's this additional control, which is the A and B sweep separation. So by turning that up, it separates the 2 sets of beams. And then if I turn this knob here, I can change the delay on the second or the B channel relative to the A channel. And if I pull out the time base knob, that affects the delayed sweep, so I can actually change to a different time base for that delayed sweep and really, you know, zoom in on a part of a waveform, for example. And it may not be too clear on the video, but for example here the primary trace gets brighter for this part of it. Same thing with the sine wave. That shows which part of the trace is shown on the delayed sweep, even though it's spread out on the time base. So you're basically zooming this little area out to here. And as I change the delayed sweep, you can see where the highlighted area is creeping to the left. So that lets you zoom in and kind of use it as a magnifier, amongst many other things it's capable of doing. So I've just gone back to normal dual trace mode here. And the 2235 has an excellent pedigree. It was a scope that Tektronix made for a long time. I seem to remember hearing that they made this model for like 20 years or something. And the military, the US military, liked this scope so much that they had Tektronix make a militarized version of it. Just a little more rugged, and some, I think, temperature and vibration specifications were improved. It looks very much the same, but they gave it a different model number that goes with the military designation. This is also, because they made it for so long, there's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of them available on eBay in various states of repair. Supposedly parts are still pretty much available for this series if they need to be repaired. Oh, scale illumination, I didn't do that. I don't even know how that's supposed to work, actually. I have to read the manual. Oh, that's the beam finder. I was pushing the wrong thing. Scale illumination. And it's not too clear here with all the lights on in the room, but you can see that there's still some illumination around the border of the screen. and that causes the graticule lines to light up. If you're in a dim room, for example, that can help see those. It's not very obvious in a well-lit room. This scope is also pretty easy to calibrate and adjust. Dave Jones with the EEV blog shows how he adjusted another scope in this same series, just a slightly different version of the same model, and how straightforward that is, how accessible the controls are in the trim pots. I had actually arranged to buy one of these from a local company in the Chicago area that buys used test equipment, refurbishes it, and resells it with good warranties and so on. And they had it all lined up. They had one picked out for me, but then when their technicians were going over it, they found a couple of problems with it that they decided were going to take them too many workbench hours to make it right compared to the price they'd quoted me. So they canceled the order, and I didn't have anything to go with then. And I visited the Tektronix Museum, the Vintage Tech Museum in Beaverton, Oregon in May of 2018. And I forget exactly now how it came about, but I got the idea that there was a fellow in Seattle that kind of has a business of restoring tech scopes and reselling them, and I looked around on eBay and found what I think is the same guy's channel or eBay store, and he had a number of 2235As that were all, as he claimed, completely cleaned up and verified to make sure everything was working perfectly, with a warranty, and I think it was a 1-year warranty, and very fair prices. He also calibrated it and listed his calibration methods and the standards referenced in the calibration. So that's something many of the resellers don't do, is verify and calibrate. So I think I got a pretty good deal. You may ask what this scope cost me, and it was about $400. An uncalibrated, untested scope of this same model on eBay from other sellers might typically run more like $300. I thought the extra $100 for the calibration and the feedback this guy had 100% positive, and I'm quite happy with it so far. I haven't had a lot of time to use it, but it's a very nice scope, and I hope it'll serve me well for a long time. And conveniently, it's not too different in size from my Gold Star, so it fits on my custom bench here that I made specifically with the Gold Star in mind, so that the depth of the scope is only slightly deeper. So instead of the Gold Star with the scope hitting the wall back there on the back side, the front of the Tektronix overhangs the table here by about the width of my finger, which isn't too bad. Anyway, so hope you found this little update interesting. And just to finish off this little video, in May of 2018 I visited the Vintage Tech Museum in Beaverton, Oregon, which is on the campus of Tektronix, although it's not apparently part of Tektronix officially. It's a 501c3 or something like that. Their website is vintagetech.org, and one of the things they have for sale there is a little circuit board that's along the lines of the oscilloscope clocks, just a little microcontroller with a couple of digital to analog converters on them. And if you hook it up to your scope in XY mode, you get the Tektronix logo, which alternates periodically with the Tektronix Wizard skateboarding along. It doesn't really flicker like this. That's a refresh rate on the camera. I'm not sure what it'll look like on the finished video, but on the viewfinder of the camera it's flickering, but in reality it doesn't do that. It's a nice stable image. So that's just a cute thing. I don't know if you have to visit the museum to get these, or I think you can just order these, and they use it as a fundraiser for the museum. I think they're about $25 or so. So, cute thing.